Hello there and welcome. I am Danny, spiritualtherapist.com, and boy, do I have a surprise for you today. The lady in the screen is called Andrea Foulkes, and she is a clinical hypnotherapist, a past life regressionist, and more recently, she is sharing her body of work to the world in Soul Freedom Awakening. Now, a little bit of background on this beauty you see in front of you. It's so funny. Our backgrounds are so linked. We were both models in London years and years ago. We both worked on QVC television. And this woman, she was on mainstream television. When I'm saying that, she was on a particular Good Morning Breakfast show. I mean, that is a big stinking deal in the UK. She was on television every week on this Good Morning Breakfast show for a year.
Yeah, lunchtime.
Right. Well, okay, but so she basically ruled the airwaves, mainstreaming what she's doing. Anyway, she got a little bit too real for some people, and of course, those scaredy cats, those scaredy pants that don't want you to be powerful out there in the world and really know who you truly are at a soul level. They kind of went for her. In horrible ways, but she is but truly believe, stick it up your ass. You're never going to stop love coming through. Love is going to run you over. Love is going to run through you. I would love to welcome my beautiful friend, an amazing global soul freedom awakener, Andrea Foulkes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Danny. That's beautiful. And blessings from Avalon, which is where I'm at the moment in Glastonbury, so in the UK. So it's been a big journey, really. I think those whole my journey's been 20 years of waking up from really, I think, like little children, you'd I would anyway, astral travel out of the corner of my bedroom as a child, but I was an only child, so I didn't really talk about what was happening to me. I think a lot of us, had that experience, probably having mystical experiences, but we don't talk about it. And then I think over time, like we talk about often, you start to shut down and become more mainstream and 3D because you go to school and then you're being exposed to all these other people, and then it shuts down. So, my bigger reawakening, because that's what I like to think, it's not like we're learning anything new, we're just unbraiding this knowledge that's stored inside us. And some of us don't need that much to kind of start flying again. Mine was literally bumping into a girl at the gym in London. She kept saying to me, I'm going to these astrology classes. And I kept saying, oh, I'd love to do that. That sounds interesting. But then I never did anything about it. Like most of us, somebody has to keep saying something sometimes before it clicks with you. And then eventually I did go on a little development course, but they hadn't got astrology, they'd got psychometry. And if people don't know what psychometry is, it was holding inanimate objects like jewelry predominantly and picking up information about people from holding objects. And I was really good at it, but they were also really good at picking up about me. And then it just evolved and I ended up in development classes, and it was like being at the school of Hogwarts. And from being not particularly good at school, here I was like top of the class, like, which I think is what's happened for a lot of us. I think the positive now for many of us is that we didn't do particularly well at school. We daydreamed out of the window. We didn't listen. And I think the fact that we didn't listen and the fact that we didn't pay that much attention was we knew that this information was not the truth and that we didn't need to absorb it. Of course, it didn't always look like we were doing particularly well in school, but perhaps we were doing well with friendships. And, I ran the school tuck shop, yet I was in the idiots class for maths.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too. I remember I was so good at English because I was so interested in storytelling, and then I couldn't figure out math, but I was doing math at algebra at college level. When my math teacher, we used to call him Jesus because he had long hair, Mr. Lane, when he would do an algebraic, equation on the board, on the whiteboard, I would know literally what was going to come next. I don't know how, I just knew it. But then the second that I took my eyes off the board and onto the paper, it vanished. And I remember one time he was so angry, running down the gangway. And this was a really nice teacher everybody loved. And he slammed his wiper on my desk and he just thought I was messing around. And I wasn't, I wasn't. So it's like you say, that we, during school, me too, like it was so boring. And because it's a 200-year-old system that's dead and done, we're all infiltrated with information that doesn't help us largely, doesn't really take us anywhere for most of us. And yet it's just like daydreaming out the window, because we know that we can do so many different things energetically, and we want a loving environment. We all vibe at that. Well, people like you and I do, and many others, we vibe at that love frequency. Can you talk a little bit about, it was so interesting because the astral traveling as a little girl that no one's taught or trained you. Can you talk about how that came into being very first, when you first realized you could do that?
Well, I don't think I thought I was doing that. I think I just thought this was life, that you disappeared out of the corner of your bedroom at night, and it was like the room got bigger and off you went out into the cosmos and the universe, and nobody ever talked about these things. So I just thought that was the norm, like that was my experience. It was the norm. I never talked about it with anybody. I think as a child, I would see people. I was always like, I had friends, but I was always felt like I was on the outside looking in a lot of the time to other people's behavior and how they were living. And I wouldn't necessarily relate to it. And yet people liked me, I liked people, but I still always felt a bit alone, which I think is how a lot of people who are very empathic or quite spiritual, they feel a bit on the outside of everything.
Yeah, it's very true. When you were astrally traveling, obviously years later, you realized that's actually what you were doing as a little girl. Where were you going? What were you seeing? What kind of experiences were you having? And how did it feel in your body?
I'd love to say I was going to these amazing places, but I really don't remember. I just remember astral traveling. I remember when I started in this development class, when I had my big awakening, and in that development class, we were doing guided meditations. And, the people in the group were like, oh, I think I saw the color, orange, or I think they were a nice person. And I'd be like on the money going, yes, I think you lived with your granddad as a child, and this is the address, and this is where you lived, and this is what happened. And, you'd have to meet your spirit guide at the beginning. And so I had this spirit guide in the beginning of my journey when this all started, and then he disappeared really quickly, which is another thing I think is quite important that people understand is I don't have, as what people would classify a spirit guide now, I don't have those things. So it can feel like a sense of abandonment, but it's not. So when I started, I had this guy called Mohammed, and we'd be off, going flying on our magic carpet, going to lots of places, having amazing experiences. And then other beings would come in, and I was being given channeled information about world events, things I didn't know anything about. I would be levitating off my bed. I mean, I was so tuned into the intuition of, being guided to places and information and connecting with people. And they were telling me very quickly, you're going to have to stand on a very big soapbox for what you believe in and what we're awakening within you, this DNA coding that's awakening in you. You're going to have to stand up hugely and speak out. And they were just showing me the globe, or the flat earth, and putting a box on it, and me standing on the box and just speaking my truth as I knew it to be. And that's what they said: speak your truth as you know it to be. And so very quickly is how the TV stuff happened, but it all happened actually, ironically, through QVC, really.
Wow. Hi, Tina, love you. Hi, Paul, love you. But talk about what was the awakening through QVC. How can that seems such a random.
Well, I was still working at QVC when I was having this big awakening, and I lived in London in Sloane Square at the time, so I would be at QVC a lot because it was actually on Battersea, which is like less than half a mile down the road. So I'd be at this place all the time, and I'd work for all kinds of companies, and one of them was Aveda, and it was still privately owned at the time by Hearst Reckelbacher. And they saw me coming to get my press discounts and things like that. And they saw me on TV, because before I was on This Morning, I was on a show called Kilroy, talking about being psychic and being a model and all these things.
Yeah.
And they saw me on that. People maybe remember that show in the UK. It was a long time ago, called Kilroy. And they said, oh, we saw you on that show. Do you want to come and give talks in our stores about the things that you know about? Because whenever you come, you've always got crystals and stuff in your pocket and always saying all kinds of interesting things. And I said, well, what would I talk about? And they said, just talk. So I started doing these talks, and then they evolved into workshops, and then they invited me to their other stores. But it started off in their flagship store in Marylebone High Street in London. And then they said, well, why don't you make a flyer? You know, so I made a flyer for these kind of healings that I was doing at the time, which I called my hand waftings. So I was doing these hand waftings on people. And then I started to see people's past lives and other events for people's lives. And I thought, well, maybe I need to learn regression hypnotherapy properly. So that's what I learned. But I could already see their Akashic records. But to be honest with you, I'd never even heard that word, Akashic records. I only heard that word in the last 10 years. And I've probably only used that word in the last 10 years to actually be able to say Akashic records, being slightly dyslexic. So I didn't actually understand the skills and gifts I had, which I think is probably what might happen for a lot of people. As maybe it's not quite so extreme now, because we have the internet of things to learn things from. But back in the day, I didn't have access to the internet. I only had access to going and getting books, and which would clarify my experiences, which I think is the best way for people to learn. Because I see people now saying, oh, I want to do what you want to do. I want to do this as a job. And what I would say is, and the other thing is, people always want to know more than what they know. And I think that when you want to know more than what you know, that stops you learning more. Because in my experience, by not wanting to do this as a living, I ended up doing this as a living. It was just my pure joy to want to do this. You know, I'd be at QVC and people would say, give Andrea your ring, or Joy, she'll read it. And, you know, so I got to practice on all these people. And then I'd be like, who wants to be regressed today? Come to my house later. You know, I'm doing these regressions. And I had this big, massive awakening, very much linked to the Pleiadian star being, you know, they were rewiring me energetically. Everything that they told me was coming true. They told me to trust, not worry about money. You know, everything will be provided for. Really don't worry. And I'd be like, I'm renting this great place. Do you know how much the rent is? Don't worry about money. But I didn't worry about money. And, you know, it would all be provided for. And it really was.
That's amazing. I need to go back a little bit here, because one thing, when I'm doing a conversation with anybody, especially when they've got such a rich treasury of wealth to offer the general public in the world, I never assume that anybody watching knows exactly what the person means. So you mentioned the Akashic records. I want to go there in a second, but I also want to prepare you a little bit for sharing your 2000 awakening. But just to go into the Akashic record, just to let people know, it's known as many different things. Some people call it the Akashic records, Akashic records. Now, could you please explain a little bit about what that means?
Well, this is only my interpretation of what I think the Akashic records are and what I think I specialize in. So I say I specialize in the emotional Akashic records. So to me, that is weaving into, because this is what we're really healing, or what I focus on healing in people. Even though I could take them to see past lives and events, it's the emotion of that event that is important for your healing. So it's important that we emotionally go into what are called, from my perspective, soul Akashic records, which is the timeline of your existence. So that includes past lives, inner child stuff, womb stuff, between lives, ancestral things. It's the whole thing, you know. And because I can see entities attached to people intuitively, I feel it, I know it. And so I'm very good at going into that, but it's not releasing them in the way that most people do it. It's, you know, realizing you've got to go to the day these entities have attached to people and heal the emotional cohesion to that soul, to that person, and go into the minutiae detail of that, release that. And then the entities are released because there's a resolution and guided to a benevolent place for them. And the client sees this, they often experience it. So I really, to me, I know there's people who possibly go into the Akashic Records in a different way, and it means perhaps something different to them. But to me, it's the emotional cohesion. So although we'll see the story of your soul and the past lives, I'm really only interested in either bringing forth positive gifts that you have shut your DNA codes down to, or bringing up the negative emotion that needs clearing into the 0 point field, so that we clear it out of your physical body and your emotional body and your energy body, so that you are neutral to that. It's not like you're going to try and think positive to overcome that fear, like, oh, let me let fear out of my body, which you can do. It's finding the origin of the cell memory of your fear. It's finding the origin of your anger, the origin of your betrayal. You know, if it's a connection with another soul that you might be perceiving as a soulmate, and it you know, hasn't turned out quite how you thought it would. It's not fluffy bunnies and rainbows and unicorns. It's actually quite destructive to both of you. So it's going into the soul Akashic records between the two of you, and seeing if there is, you know, a soul connection between you, and healing that back to it being neutral, or seeing if it's the emotion that this person holds that is a disharmonious resonance linked to people you've known in the timelines of your existence, and it's not been healed, and clearing that.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. It is so important, so important. So in terms of the Akashic Records, I remember the very first time I went into a meditation that was guided when I was studying with a spiritual school that I went to for 4 years in Solana Beach, California. It was headed up by Dr. Chris Lemon. And I was so, like you, clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairvoyant, meaning I could see the demonics and the angelics and the aliens. I could feel everything. I could hear people's thoughts, everything. It's so overwhelming. You get so bombarded. You don't know what the hell's happening, you know, because there weren't many people to me that I could talk to. And in church, they thought I had the devil in me and prayed the devil out of my little 7-year-old body at 7. But at 7, that taught me that adults are liars. They're scared of going to hell, and they'll attend church just to make sure they've got a one up there with God. All right, God, Jesus, keep me a space up there. You know, a mansion, apparently I get a mansion, you know, not mocking religion, just giving my understanding experience at 7 years old. Wow. So anyway, I went to this school, and it was so beautiful. There were so many wonderful things I was taught, especially by a woman called Mayo Soro Espinosa. And she had, in her lifetime, she was a royal princess from Estonia, taken by the Nazis, survived with her body 7 Nazi death camps. You know, so this woman had been through the depths of hell and beyond, beyond, beyond. And she was one of our teachers. And so she took us on this journey, and we closed our eyes, we breathed in, we breathed out, we went into a nice relaxed state. And then she was saying, right, you're going to get in an elevator, and the elevator is going to go up and up and up through the sky. And then you're going to come into a room, and you're going to see you're in some kind of a library. What does it look like? And in this library, there's a book that belongs to you. And it has all the records of this life and every life you've had in the past, whether it's past, present, or future. And so I'm listening to her, and I'm going in this place I've never even heard of before. And then all of a sudden, I see this giant book in my mind's eye, and there are 2 names on it, because I changed my name to Danny from Peggy. And I'm look, Peggy is at the top. I can't believe I just admitted that, but anyway, I can't stand that name.
You don't look like a Peggy.
I know, but I was named after an angel who anyway. So I knew it was real, because when you go on a certain meditation or a guided meditation, you haven't got time to make shit up. You don't.
And this is what I think
right?
I think that's so important that you say that you haven't got time to make stuff up, because you know, often people who are new to this and they come and have a session with you, if you're regressing them in person, you know, and from your perspective, you're like, I've been doing this 20 years. I've seen a lot of people being regressed. They go, oh, I think I made that up. I'm like, listen, your imagination is not that good. You cannot make that stuff up. You know, when someone says to you, what year is it? You're like 1537. You didn't think, oh, what year might it be? You know, and, you know, you don't deliberate over what the answers are. Sometimes people deliberate because they're like, should I say that or not? What will she think? And, you know, the whole thing is that I tell people is not to deliberate, you know, to just say what you see and to trust I think what you're saying is so important, because people don't trust their inner world. This is your truth. What you experience in meditation, going inside yourself, is your truth. What you watch on television or what other people tell you is maybe true, but might be a lie. What you see in your inner world is your absolute truth of your soul. Yes, you might have to work to unravel it and understand it and see what it is, but it's your truth.
Yeah, it is my body. It's a delicate area. It's a beautiful journey. It's a very a tender experience for people going into it for the first time. And it's definitely something that more people are ready for. And it's friggin' ancient. It's from the ancients, the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, and thousands of years before. Like, we are an old civilization. We're coming back in, having different reincarnations. I mean, we're getting more able to accept these different possibilities, you know. And for those that don't believe it, they won't be watching this conversation. They'll have you know, pegged out ages ago, you know, because they're worried that, well, no, the Bible says this and that, so I can only believe this because it's the only way. And they don't have an ability because they're so stuck in fear. If they don't follow that word or this religion or that rule book, then, you know, they're screwed. There's going to be no nirvana for them, which of course is not true.
It's not true.
And it's a lie.
I think that was the good thing about how mine wasn't your classic way into spiritual stuff. So to end up really quickly on a mainstream terrestrial TV program, you know, being given permission to do past life regression, talk about spiritual stuff. They even let me talk about entities twice on mainstream TV, which was this morning in the UK, on ITV, and then give me my own show doing 2 series of that, was quite extraordinary for that period of time. It's still extraordinary. Nobody else has really done that on terrestrial television here. But what it was great for was that you got the masses going, oh, I wouldn't normally be listening to her, but she's here every week. Here she is again. Perhaps, you know, perhaps there's some truth in what she's saying. You know, we had a regression detective, you know, they had researchers researching it, and then a gentleman that we would use footage for showing whether these people's past lives existed. I mean, I wasn't interested so much in whether people's past lives existed because I knew that was true. Right. But they were interested in, can we prove these people existed? Whereas I wanted to show the healing aspect of going into past lives, that we were going in them to heal people, for people to heal their fears, their limiting beliefs, disease, illness in their body. That was all within the potential of what you can heal in regression. You know, you can go inside yourself and heal things, because if you heal the source of your stress and anxiety and your fear and your negative emotion, your cells will rejig themselves in your body into a more harmonious frequency. And, you know, you can't have sickness or illness in a body that's alkaline. It's only acidic bodies that get sick and ill. But the reason your body turns acidic is, we all want to believe it's, you know, there's this huge thing about diet, but diet's only a small percentage of it. It's your emotional inner state, the subconscious mind, that really is the be all and end all of everything. And you can go to all these self-help seminars and think positive as much as you like, but if you've got a story running on a subconscious level, you will still keep going back to the default of the subconscious mind until you get back to the origin of the story. And it's a bit like going through a filing cabinet, going through the past lives, the inner child, the ancestral. You're just going through a filing cabinet, opening it. And it's hard to do it on your own. That's why it's good to go to someone to help you. And that person, if they're really intuitive and wise and skilled and experienced stuff themselves and empathic, they're going to be able to round up that file, take what you've told them about your life in this lifetime, and release that file and delete it to the 0 point, so it's not emotionally affecting you anymore.
Yeah, that's just woo. Yeah.
And why wouldn't you want to do that? You know,
exactly. Like, so it's knowing that you can heal the cellular memory, the toxicity that gets stuck in the body. And right now, with the element of fear and stress that the entire planet is forced under, it is creating an amplification in the cellular structure that is really triggering people. They can't stand feeling so awful anymore. They're looking to release. They're overwhelmed on many levels. Now, I want to talk about your awakening next, please, in 2000 in London. Then I want to move through to genetic tapes, programming, and ancestors, if that's not too much.
I mean, it's so interesting you asking me in that way, because I'm like, oh my God, what did happen? It was so profound to me at the time, and it was really intense for 3 months. So I was going to this little development class. You know, I'd been to this one for this psychometry. I went to a class that I didn't really vibe with the teacher after this beautiful lady that I'd had on this one-day course. And then I went for a psychic reading somewhere. And this guy said, you know, I see this is going to be your life. I'm like, oh, I don't think so. And you know, he was like, yes, you know, I have a development class, you can come and join this class. I was like, oh no, I don't really want to sit with these mediums. He was like, no, I'll tell them you're coming. So I sat with this group of people, like I said to you, and literally it took off. Like I said, it was the school of Hogwarts. And you know, I was off and running. But what was happening at home was even more profound, because I'd just be laying in my bed doing this wafting over my body, like with my hands, which I now know is I didn't know it then, but now I know this is something called light language. And sometimes I speak light language and I sing and we talked about this earlier, you sing polyphonic overtoning, and I speak light language and do the polyphonic. But also light language can be with your hands. So I was doing all this, rewiring the whole of my energy field. I'd be elevating off my bed. I was getting channeled messages at the time from all kinds of beings that were not in a physical body anymore. They were giving me the mathematical equations for the elixir of life. I didn't know what the elixir of life. I mean, I was channeling stuff that, you know, it was so profound. People were like, where did you get that from? I went, oh, I wrote that in 5 minutes. And they were like, no, you couldn't have written that in 5 minutes. I was like, no, honestly, I did. And you know, I had piles of this stuff, books of these things about everything that's going to happen in the world. And I've looked back at them at the beginning of the first lockdown, because I haven't got all of them anymore. I've got some of them, they disappeared. But when I looked at them now, everything that we're experiencing now was relatable to what I was channeling then, but I didn't have the consciousness at the time when I was channeling this information to actually I didn't understand what I was channeling. I have no idea. I was like, oh, sounds amazing, but I don't really understand it.
Right.
But everything that I was being told during this awakening was coming true. I was having these divine connections with people, and you know, even when I was on Kilroy, people were contacting me, wanting to meet with me and have these connections. So it was like the whole universe was just helping me to do what I was meant to do. And I think you go through a period of, you know, not everybody who is doing this is going to have to stand up in a very public way to do what they're going to do. You know, that might not be their path. That's not their journey. They're just going to maybe stand up in their own family or in their own home or something. It's just to be true to yourself. You know, all we're learning to be is absolutely true to yourself. And then over the years of my awakening, I've manifested ailments or illnesses, and I had to heal my body. I mean, the first thing I healed in my body was polycystic ovaries. I healed in myself, which was kind of just almost before my big awakening. I think it probably was part of my big awakening, was just accessing that divine forgiveness. Now, you can access divine forgiveness in your own time, on your own. That happened for me. That's how I heal my polycystic ovaries. But most people need to see a story. Over time, I realized the other things I needed to see a story. And at one point, these beings came and they were showing me everyone I'd ever dated. They were showing me everyone I'd known, because bizarrely, I've known a lot of people who've passed over in this lifetime. And they were just showing me all these people and energetically, emotionally showing me the role they played in my life. And you know, some of these things, when I see it with clients, it's so profound when they go between lives and they're going to this place where they're meeting these interdimensional beings who don't have a physical body, but they're luminous, they're radiant. And you know, the client's going, oh my God, you know, often people say, oh, they're showing me it's just a play, it's just a play, and I'm taking it all far too seriously, it's just a play. And sometimes they come in and they just do this amazing healing work with the people in this interlife state, and then other people need to go through their past lives and really slowly, you know, I'm taking them to the next significant event and then we're wrapping it up at the end, but they're much slower in their experience, or we're going back to events in the womb that have traumatized them, and we're hearing what the parents said that
Right.
has caused them some emotional distress
Yeah.
in the womb, and we're having to resolve all that to it being neutral. And then, you know, your soul fragments off, and you as an adult don't understand that something that somebody said when you were 3 has set your whole life on a certain trajectory that is a negative trajectory, that has you, you know, believing limiting beliefs about yourself. And of course, the biggest thing that we see with people is people have so many issues around poverty, you know, abundance, and you know that they sabotage their own prosperity.
Yeah, so true. You mentioned something that is so crucial in my opinion, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this because you mentioned divine forgiveness. Now, a lot of people, their instant intake of that, their consciousness or unconsciousness will go to Christianity, being a sinner. Number one, I will say until the day I die that the newborn babies are not born sinners. Nobody is born a sinner. It is utter shit. It was told to make you feel ashamed, to make you feel less than, to be dominated by, let's say, Christianity or the Bible or whatever. I do not believe it. It is not true. It is a catastrophic evil in terms of what I believe. To keep people saying, oh, I'm a sinner. Oh, he's a sinner. Oh, she's a sinner. Oh, she's going to hell for sure. What'd she do? She stole a sheep. Well, she was starving, so still a sin, you know, and so much more, right? It makes me like, bleh. So in 2004, when I was living in America, California, I studied to become an ordained minister. My main drive at that point was to marry people of the same sex, because the entire world is so jammed on many levels of, oh no, you can't love another man if you're a man. Oh no, don't do that if you're a woman. That's disgusting. Who the hell is any one person to say people in love cannot be in love? You know, anyway, I don't want to go too far down that path, but when you said divine forgiveness, that's what you triggered in me. Now, when you talk about, in your mind, you were taken back to all the boyfriends, lovers, and sexual interactions that you had. So it feels like you were more going down that road of forgiving yourself.
Yeah, that wasn't about the forgiveness. That was just showing me, in that experience, it wasn't anything to do with forgiveness, because it was just showing me the role, which is really important in itself. It was showing me the role all these guys had played in my life, like on an energetic level, the importance of my interaction with them and what it meant on a bigger soul level for me. I was like, oh wow, that was, you know, but it was beyond even putting it into words. It was just energy. The same with the people who'd passed over. It was showing me what I'd learned by my interaction with them, but it was so beyond words. It was just energy. But I think the forgiveness thing is, I as an individual find it very easy to forgive. That's just my default setting. And I think that also comes into the thing that I have never felt in myself projected out at anybody. I've never been jealous, but I've experienced people projecting jealousy at me, but I didn't understand what it was. Like as a little girl, I would say things and my mum would say it was because they're jealous. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand jealousy I would never project it to anybody else, but I had to learn what it meant. And I think often because of the jealousy thing, a lot of people have to learn forgiveness because they've been jealous of people and they've projected jealousy at people. And I think jealousy, which will go back to forgiveness, because I think jealousy and forgiveness are interwoven. I think jealousy is because you believe that somebody is something or has something that you cannot acquire in yourself or cannot be within yourself, which is in general not true.
Yeah, beautiful.
You know, so it's coming from this lack of yourself. You believe you're lacking. And so where does the origin of this belief in lack in who you are? Perhaps it comes from lifetimes or ancestral programming of being less than who you truly are, and believing what other people have said to you. And you know, those people have to live with what they've said to the other people. So then they've got to forgive themselves for all the horrible things that they've said to other people, or the dreadful things that they've done, which, you know, I didn't understand jealousy in this lifetime. But actually, as we're talking now, I'm realizing when I saw the darkest of the dark of my own lives, 2 really dark lifetimes that I've lived, and because I'd met a gentleman in this lifetime, I was like, oh, what is the connection to this guy now? And why have I met 3 guys, one after the other, who've all had a vasectomy? And yet at that point in my life, I wanted children, you know, and I was like, why am I never getting children? You know, why, when I say to a guy, oh, I'd love to have a child with you, they're like, oh, no. And, you know, they, not you, oh. And of course, you know, you'd think, well, she seems okay, you know, I don't know why men would be like, you know, but they were in general, you know, like horrified at the thought of having a child with me. And so I was like, well, this is really weird. I've got to get to the origin of it. And it was all linked to past lives, you know, where I had been a jealous woman and I had been jealous of all these men in love with these other women. And I would run a temple in a past life and I wielded that power in a very nasty way. And, you know, I was jealous of the fact that although I had perhaps power in that lifetime, I ran a temple, it was outer power, it wasn't inner power, and I used my outer power, you know, to destroy these people's lives, their love lives, by I will have that man because I run the temple. But you know, that was what I had to learn. And then when I finally saw those lives in this lifetime, I had to truly forgive myself, you know, and feel what it felt like to feel that guilt and shame of my own behavior, and then forgive myself, because it's not happening now.
That's a perfect rendition. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that, because again, it's just so important when we touch on a subject that we take the time to open it up so everybody can have a moment to absorb information on a different level. I did a broadcast with a Sherry Div band. She's all about the kids. She's an amazing speaker, and working, we're collaborating to help the children and create different schools and centers and whatever, along with many other people on the planet, not just her and I. And I mentioned that I used to be haunted by this old man. He would come through my wall. And you know, in England, all the old men, they wear suits, don't they? Like a shirt and a tie. And I think it's because we didn't have jeans in those days. This old man was a past life, so like 1920s. He'd come through the wall holding a bag of puppies. He dropped the puppies on me. I knew he was going to kill the puppies. And then one day, years later, he comes back through the wall. I'm now an adult. And I see him standing there and I'm like, oh. Well, first of all, I went mad and said, get the fuck out of my house. How dare you? How dare you after all these years? Get out. You know, I was so done seeing demonic dark ones and worked it through. And then he turned around in the most saddest, forlorn way. And I'm like, oh, that's me. That's me. I was that horrible, mean old man. But when I died, I was right. I was frightened to go to the light because I was told that we've been programmed. If you've been bad, whatever bad means to anybody, you're going to go to hell. That's why there are so many wandering earthbound old people, so many of which I've come across and helped move to the light. Darling, you did nothing wrong. You're not a sinner. It's all bollocks. Let's just move his big, bring in the angels or whatever it was that we did. So important to admit that we may have not all been the best in a past life incarnation. And again, to round out the divine giveness element, that we didn't come into this world to be, to be like walking through it as sinners, because that's a lie too. And I'm fine with saying that to any Christian, Catholic, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's okay. We're all allowed our own thoughts, our own heads, our own synopsis of what we think is true. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But let's stop being afraid, and let's stop trying to save the world, or run with one thought only, because what's the point of that?
I think also it was interesting you said that you didn't realize that was you were trying to get rid of this man, you didn't realize it was you, and I think that probably happens to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people in religion, I mean, I think they want the companionship and the friendship and the having a coffee on a Sunday morning, or some peace in their life or something. So I think they don't. And also when I've questioned some people who've not studied theology, and they're like, I definitely know that my religion is the right one and all the others are wrong. Yeah. I'm like, well, have you studied the other ones? No. Well, but I know mine's the best one. Mine's definitely the right one, but how can that be if you haven't studied all the others? Because you would have had to have studied all the others to go, you know what, I've studied them all now and I've decided that this one is the right one. But if you haven't studied them, then you make these big sweeping statements, no, my prophet is better than your prophet, so it's very, and then it gets into a level of competitiveness, kind of thing. And often what I would say about all these deeply religious, or people who do describe themselves as deeply religious, is I go, okay, you're deeply religious. Let's turn down the volume and let's watch what you do in life, what you choose to do. What are your actions? Because they don't look like anything like the true essence of what love is or kindness is. I don't see you necessarily embodying that. That's not what you're living. That's not how you think. You're not living that. You're living in, bitterness, resentment, anger, and fear. So that isn't the essence of what any of this should have been at the heart of what the people who are the supposed prophet teachers were teaching, because they were teaching love and forgiveness and kindness to all beings, and you're not embodying that.
Yes, so true. If people really did take the time, which I have done in this lifetime, to study Catholicism, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, there's so many, Buddhism, Hinduism, so many different ones, Kabbalism, not the evil Cabal, Illuminati, people that you were talking about years ago on mainstream television before many, many, many others, but the Kabbalah with the K, which is the tree of life, and beautiful. That was actually one of my favorite ones. But what you find, if you actually do truly dive in, is that the creation story is pretty much the same. The Trinity is there in every single religion on the planet, and some of these religions are like thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Oh no, can only be 2,000. So I'm a Christian. Oh, why did the dinosaurs come? No, they were there to trick us. Jesus was testing us. No such thing as dinosaurs. Enough now. We're very intelligent beings. Where we are now, this tipping point we've already tipped over, it is time to just enjoy looking into everything. Don't be frightened. Don't be thinking, oh, well, Jesus might be watching me, or God, or the Jehovah, the big bad ones, the ones that say, you can only worship me, and if you don't, you'll go to hell. Boom, fire and lightning. Boom, you're dead. Oh my God. No one stands a chance against that kind of tyranny, and a tyrannical despot leader. There are so many on the planet. Well, they're kind of leaving now, which is great.
Well, but they have. I mean, I got that in February 2020, the dark overlords left the planet. I mean, my intuition, told me that they'd gone. And then I saw some other people who, I don't know these people, but they have, you know, social media channels, and they had written exactly the same thing as me. We might have been a week out. I think we were a week out, you know, and I thought, well, that's great, because I found 2 or 3 other people who've come to the same conclusion as me, that those dark beings left this dimension of reality because it's a frequency reality. So the magnetic, because what people don't probably realize is the magnetic energy field shifted on the planet from, you know, hugely from March 2020 onwards. And if you look, you'll see weather coming in, whether it's manipulated weather or whatever, it's coming in from a different direction. So some magnetic energy field has shifted, and those beings could not be in they thought they could make it through this magnetic energy field shift in a external Merkaba, because they didn't have an internal heart chakra Merkaba. So they thought they could make it through that. They then figured out they couldn't. So I think what we're going through now is those beings that were controlling the other humans, that had this consciousness coming through their body, the beings that were controlling them have gone. So you've got humans, you know, representing a human with a very programmed consciousness that doesn't have anything else feeding it now. So it can only kind of do what it was doing before, but it's not got any new information. It's just repeating the same cycle, which is starting to have glitches now. And, you know, because they just keep repeating themselves, everyone's getting to see through it, you know, like, why would you listen to these people? They keep saying the same thing, and it doesn't add up. You don't have to be very bright to see that this doesn't add up, you know. And now what we're being called to do is to take responsibility for our lives. And in taking responsibility for our lives, and it's only from taking responsibility for our lives that we can heal, you know, we can increase our vibration. And when you get to the point of increasing your vibration and healing yourself, you're then, you know, what we like to call a sovereign being, because, you know, you don't need the other things so much. And I think they're pushing fear so hard right now. I saw somebody today, and it did make me feel sad to see. She went, oh, I'm really not looking forward to going back to the office, because there'll be lots of people breathing in there, you know, like, oh, another, what, a whole room full of humans breathing. And you've allowed what's happened. You know, I can't imagine that in March 2020 you were worried about an office full of breathing humans. Yeah. You weren't. You know, you have allowed trauma-based mind control to happen to you. And you are frightened now of being in an office full of humans breathing, or you're frightened. You know, one of my friends, she works, I won't say where she works, but she says to me, oh my God, they're sanitizing the door handles in the office. I don't do it. She said, but they are. And then when we have to pass documents to each other, we have to put them in a plastic envelope and pass them to each other. Okay. I'm like, oh my God, you know, but I can't, you know, you and I, we're not living that reality, you know, it's far removed from our world. But for some people, you know, vibrationally, this is what they're living, you know, this is the work that they haven't yet done, which they will be continued to be invited to do by their own higher self. Their own higher self is going to keep, and their higher self is the authentic you, because I knew you're going to go, what, can you explain what higher self means? Higher self to me is the authentic version of you, which is who you were born to truly be, but you stopped being that person because you created this facade personality. So, you know, the facade personality says, oh yeah, I'm really having a lovely day, when actually you're having a shit day. The facade you just people pleases. It gets a handbag with a logo on it because it thinks that the latest handbag will give you your sense of self-worth, you know, and that's the whole fashion industry. Although fashion's lovely and I like it, but you know, it's not who you are anymore. You don't need to have the latest handbag. You don't need to have the latest shoes. You don't need that world to justify your identity and your existence.
Very, very true. Very beautifully expressed on so many levels. And you said so much there that I'm so glad we're recording, because, you know, people can go back and just take a piece at a time and really absorb everything that you're saying. So, gosh, we've covered awakenings, we've covered Akashic Records, we've covered regression, soul freedom, being free. We've covered religion and domination, and you know, there are so many more subjects that we could talk about in and around where our brothers and sisters on this planet are. One thing I want to say is that you have been out there, like literally by yourself, and you've got an audience that would absolutely say, yes, Danny, Andrea Foulkes has been out there in the dark woods, on the main road, on the high street, by herself, sharing her knowledge. There'll be some people that are only just having their own kind of spiritual understanding of self, who've been watching certain people on platforms around the world in different countries, who will hear you say the word sovereign, Merkaba, and they'll say to themselves, oh, she got that off so-and-so. Oh, she's heard that from so-and-so. No, she didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and jelly beans, Andrea Foulkes has been one of the foremost prominent speakers and leaders of metaphysics and spirituality that I personally have ever witnessed. And so you have, and so it is, you know?
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say that. I just feel like I have, you know, I suppose even when I was doing the TV stuff, you know, I negotiated 2 contracts without an agent. I did it myself. And then I had someone who wanted to be my agent. And, you know, on the days where she said, we've got to meet the Arcadia group, which is the people who own Topshop and stuff, to brand, you know, meditation CDs into their stores, I'd be like, oh, I can't meet them on Friday because I've got people coming from Scotland, you know. And so I made the choices of perfecting my craft, I think is the thing, perfecting through just experience of regressing thousands and thousands of people, because I would get 1,000 emails a week when I was working on TV. And I just was so joyful in regressing people that I didn't write a book. Even though I got a book deal, I had to let that go, because I didn't want to write a book and think I'm going to learn a lot more. And I think a lot of people write a book and then they stop actually doing the very thing it is that they were writing about. They had a tiny little experience and then they wrote all these books based on this tiny little experience. And then the problem you've got then is people are going, oh, but I've read this book. I'm like, yeah, but that person has a really limited experience in what they're doing. Whereas I feel like I have been, like, I do feel like I've been on the front line a little bit. And I would like to maybe share now. I haven't written a book yet. Sometimes people, I mean, this is the great thing about being in this multi-dimensional time, is that over the years, people would say to me, I've read all your books. I'm like, oh, which was your favorite? Because I think, oh, maybe I've written books, you know, maybe I've written books and I'm going to bring them through from some other dimension, and I'll just wake up and they'll be by my bed, or I'll write them in 5 minutes, you know, metaphorically 5 minutes. They won't be like this big thing to write. But I like the medium we're using now. I love film. I love sharing with people in this way. I think we can share a lot and it can't be misunderstood. And I think you talked about being dyslexic to me, and I'm dyslexic and you said dyspraxia, dyscalculia. I've got dyscalculia as well, which is where you muddle the numbers up. Whereas when we're speaking like this, there's a frequency in it, in the tonation of our voices as well. So people don't need to hear the words you're saying. It's actually a lot of what we're saying is just words, because this language is corrupted, which is where it comes into the light language, because the light language isn't corrupted. But this vocabulary, this language is corrupted. And so if you don't listen to our words, but you just hear the tonation or the rhythmical pattern in how we're speaking, that is encoded with truth in it, which will help you awaken.
That's beautiful. The tones, the vibrations, the harmonics, the frequencies, the space within the spaces, the words in between, the joy that we bring through it. You know, for anyone that you watch, anyone that you follow, anyone that you think this person has all the answers, number one, there isn't one single person that has every single answer. But for me, the truth is in the joy of the person, the kindness, the compassion, the love, the emotive journey that they go through when they're talking and delivering or interviewing somebody else. And I think if you really, when you watch somebody, if you can't connect to love, a loving vibration through them, maybe they're not your person to be watching right now, you know? And of course, there are those that would say the words I've just said and be all like, you know, totally faking, making somebody feel guilty. I mean, we've got to be careful again of that psychological switch. Like what I just did there, I could be the most manipulative person in the world, you know, and I practiced how to be this psychopathic, sociopathic fucker. And I'm trying to elude people, you know, of course I'm not, but we have to be very careful and mindful about everybody. Now, you said a couple of things, I've written a couple of things down because, dude, you are like me, we talk a million miles an hour.
Like,
I know, because we did want to get as much as we could, and you've got a massive event right after our broadcast. Can I just share with you? And please, I'm sure it's going to be similar, and I shouldn't laugh because these people so believe in themselves. But honestly, if I meet one more Mary Magdalene and one more Archangel Michael, you know, I'm going to just invite them all to meet each other.
the thing is, and I was just looking at somebody earlier who, you know, she likes to, you know, they like to wear the tea towel over their head and, you know, well, you know, depict that image of, you know,
Oh,
I live in Glastonbury, we've got a lot of them here, but you have to have compassion because, you know, when you talked about my awakening, I went through a period of feeling a deep connection with that in my experience of my awakening. And thankfully, I kept my mouth shut and I didn't go around wearing a tea towel on my head saying I was Mary Magdalene. But I think it is part of the process of awakening. Now, whether it's part of the false light, and you have to go through that because it might be part of the false light, and maybe it is a rite of passage. I think it might be a rite of passage, but I think a lot of people get stuck there. I mean, Glastonbury is full of people stuck in something. They won't like me for saying that because I don't really fit in there, but I live there. But it's like they get stuck, and it's very easy to get stuck. And I think the thing is, you're not going to unstick them unless you have compassion for them. But the problem you've got with a lot of them is they're now making a living out of this spiritual belief that they have. And it takes a great strength of character and wisdom to go, you know what, I was stuck there. And actually, I believed it 100% when I was in it. And now I see it's nonsense. And I've transcended it. And I'm prepared to let go of whatever I'm making a living out of because I realized it's nonsense and move on from that. But a lot of them, they don't move on from it. And then when you see, you know, I said, well, you know, like you said, I've met a lot of people who think they're Mary Magdalene or, you know, they're Jesus. It's like, okay. And no, but the others are all fake. I'm the real one. You're like, okay,
Jesus.
join the queue. And I think perhaps, you know, we could go into, you know, uncoding the Magdalene codes and the Yeshua, Sananda, whatever you want to call it. I think there's some truth in some of it, but whether Mary Magdalene was one person or whether it was a metaphor for a group of people, there are things within that are that touch people deeply and they resonate with. And I think it's been misinterpreted, totally misinterpreted. And the same with the Jesus Yeshua thing, it's been misinterpreted. I don't think it was necessarily one person. I think it was probably a group of people. Were they multidimensional beings? They probably were. They probably had access to many different dimensions of existence. They were probably trying to tell people the truth of themselves, not like worship me. I think they'd be horrified if they thought people were worshipping them. I think they were trying to say you can be this and more. And I think at the time those beings existed, they were probably 9-dimensional beings, but we can probably access much higher vibrational dimensional selves now, because that was 2000 years ago. And I mean, well, more than 2000 years ago.
Apparently.
Because the Bible was based on the Aramaic text, which is 12,000 years old. So it's like, you know, and that was from the Nag Hammadi library. So there's so much corruption happened and distortion.
Yeah.
But I think, and I think it goes back to the Atlantean Lemurian thing. If you existed on this planet and went to a mystery school, which brings in the other thing that really, you know, makes me go, oh no, not again. The whole, you know, because they're full of it here, training to be priestesses. You don't need to train to be a priestess. You are that. You are that. It's within you. It's who you are. You don't need some other woman to give you permission to be a priestess. You are that. It's who you are. But there are things within that that are hierarchical that need dismantling. It's not a good structure. It's, you know, those ancient mystery schools were full of so much pain and suffering for people. That is why we go into regression, into past lives, to delete and neutralize the trauma of those past life ancient mystery schools. They weren't all great. They were very destructive on many levels.
Yes. Oh my God, we're going to have to do another broadcast, because we're touching so much of the ancient, his story, history, and we're bringing light into it and getting people to think about different subjects. I want to speak myself for a moment on Mary Magdalene and what I believe this energetic is. I personally, at 7 years old, had the most beautiful experience with Jesus Christ, in my bedroom with the angels. And when I went to my church, which was an evangelical Pentecostal friggin' nightmare of threat and sinning and all the rest of it, I told these 2 old bags who were like the queens of the church, I couldn't wait to tell them about seeing Jesus in my room. And they took me into a back room. The first woman stuck her thumbs under my armpits, lifted me up and dropped me on the ground. Oh yeah, what a bitch. And then the other old bag, who was her second in command, pinched me really hard. And they told me I was a liar, I was evil, why would Jesus come to me, and all the rest of it. And so anyway, that was the night they prayed the devil out of me. That didn't even exist. Of course, it was all them, you know, it's a child coming in and saying, wow, I've seen this beautiful being. So long story short.
Jealousy. See, they were jealous of your experience.
Because the children, our children, that's what we have to listen to our children. We have to listen. Remember, they've just come from source. Source meaning their soul energy frequency in this body that directly connects to their creator. You can call that God. You can think that's a man or a woman, but it is the creative energy that created all of us that brings the soul energy into the body. Of course, that's a whole other subject. However, Mary Magdalene. Here's my hypothesis on Mary Magdalene. When we bother to go back in the history books that people have done without a religious agenda or a need to dominate, you'll find out that Mary Magdalene's family were extremely wealthy in the area where she lived. She was already herself a very high metaphysician, meaning she understood metaphysics, laws of nature, laws of, you know, metaphysics. Look it up. We haven't got time in this broadcast to go through it all, but she was one of Jesus' main disciples. She was also the single most powerful disciple. But oh no, when the men came hundreds of years later to actually write the Bible, remove books that Mother Mary had written and Mary Magdalene had written and other disciples, and they're now stored in the Vatican, that's also true. What they did was they turned her into a whore. Oh, she must have used the boobs or a vagina to, you know, seduce Jesus Christ, you know, because there's nowhere that our Father Jesus Christ would ever have succumbed to a woman. A woman must be a right old prostitute and a whore. Oh my God, look at that. We've grown up our whole lives with that story. She was a prostitute. No, she wasn't. Shame on you all. Shame on you, Vatican. Lie, 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 lie. We ain't putting up with it anymore. We're not. It's not just me talking about it. It's you, it's other people. It's like, stop with the shit. It's too late. You've lost control. You know, stop insulting the beautiful Christians that have a connection to the Christ energy, have a connection to angelic frequency. Stop telling them they're sinners and liars in every single religion. Enough. Okay, I'm going to stop. Let's talk about ancestors.
Yes, and I'll have to go in a few minutes, sadly.
I know.
There's so much intrigue that we can go into. Yeah, healing the ancestral timeline. It's so important. Like, I think a story comes to mind now, which is probably the best way to describe ancestral healing. So I had a client who was looking into why she'd manifested abnormal cells in her breast tissue. You know, why was this lump in her breast tissue? And when I went into her emotional Akashic records, I saw that 3 generations before, so that would be a great grandmother, I think that's right, great grandmother. That grandmother was the eldest sister, you know, so she had younger sisters, and one of the younger sisters had got pregnant, and she had arranged, when this younger sister had got pregnant, for the younger sister to have the baby adopted and, you know, got rid of it. I mean, at least she had the baby, but she had it got rid of. You know, nobody knew. It was all got rid of because it would have been shameful, because, you know, that's how it was back then. But her great grandmother had carried the shame of her behavior, you know, and the responsibility that she had dealt with all the legality, the paperwork, you know, getting rid of this child for her younger sister. And the guilt and shame had stayed in her. And then she had what would have been the great aunt, you know, the grief of the great aunt of having to give the child away. And all that emotion was stored in the breast tissue. You know, so once we release the emotional story and the cells, because these cells metabolize into, I'm probably using the wrong word, metastasize, I think it is. They go where there's a weakened cell memory in your body. So that's why they went there. Like, I had another client once who had cancer on his forearm. And it was why is it gone there? You know, why would it go here? Why is it not gone there? You know, and he'd been on a slave ship being whipped repeatedly on his forearm. So it had gone there. And on top of that, he had a female entity attached. He was a strict school teacher who was whipping him with a ruler here on his arm. So it had a weakened cell memory here. There was a trauma there that had not been healed. So that was why it manifested there. So, yeah, so that's kind of explaining how we start to go into the ancestral story of healing. So we're healing the story of our ancestors, you know, the origin of the story. You know, like when you say, we have a history of heart disease in my family. No, you don't have a history of heart disease. You have a history that has kept repeating itself generation after generation after generation into the cell memory, because nobody has heard the story of your ancestors. Nobody has heard the pain and suffering of your ancestors, and they need to have their story heard. And when you hear the story of your ancestors, you can release it from your cell memory, and that will make the cells in your body vibrate into a more harmonious frequency.
Fantastic. Again, this is one of the best broadcasts I've ever done in terms of allowing people, opening the mind into the metaphysical, miraculous self-healing. You know, I mean, I'm proud of all my broadcasts. I am, because I pick such beautiful subjects and beautiful people to help humanity. That's my whole agenda. But this is, okay, so I want to invite people to ask us questions in the comments section. And then we will then gather and collate those questions. And then we will have another broadcast, which I'll promote and advertise, where we actually sit and we go through as many questions as we can. To help as many people as we can, because I know you have to go, and again, we can. I know. So okay, so you're still doing sessions. People can book.
Yeah, I work in person with people. I mean, I do workshops, and sometimes I do Facebook lives where we do evenings, like I'm doing one just now, a Facebook live, hence why I've got to go. But no, I see people in person wherever I am in the world, but I happen to be in the UK at the moment. moment. And I do bob about in the UK for one-to-one sessions. And I also work with people all over the world in sessions on, I love Skype. I still use Skype. I use Skype or the phone. You can be anywhere in the world and we do these sessions, and those sessions are half an hour, an hour. The sessions in person are 2 hours. And then when I start doing you know, workshops again, we would be doing workshops again.
Right. Just very quickly, I did actually, you know, hire and book a session with Andrea and myself when I was trying to heal grief from my fiance dying very suddenly, and I can't tell you how helpful it was. And then we went on Skype, but there was no that's the alarm. We went on Skype, but there was no picture. She doesn't put the camera on, which I didn't like at first. I'm like, I want to see you, but then I realized, holy God, she took me so deep that I didn't want her to see me and my contorted face and my anguish and so please don't be put off by her not putting on her camera. It is actually a beautiful saving grace. So Andrea Foulkes, you're amazing. I love you. You are extraordinary. Seriously, you are extraordinary being. I'm so excited to bring you into my audience, and obviously, you know, you're expanding yours all the time. So we'll have a repeat. We'll invite people, send us your questions, and then we'll let you know when the two of us are going to come on again and help you with more metaphysics and spirituality. All right, lots of love, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys. I see you soon.